Hey everybody. Well, this is different. Welcome to my living room. I'm being ably assisted by my new videographer, Joe Asebedo. And welcome to Sunday here in my living room. All year I've been speaking about the yearly theme of who do we choose to be. And boy, it couldn't be more appropriate than right now. And all of March I've been talking about restoring sanity. And so today I wanted to talk about how change happens. And I was thinking a lot about a story I heard a long time ago, and it involved the evolution in physics. And so the story went like this, that when Newton created, his version of the physical laws of the universe and physics, it seemed like it was complete. It was an amazing creation, and at the time it was like a novel, new, incredible way of looking at the universe. And it was as if he had taken all these different puzzle pieces and finally put it into a puzzle in completion that made sense. And so for a long time we operated from that completed puzzle, that view, Newtonian physics. But eventually what began to happen is that these different puzzle pieces started to float into our awareness. And because the puzzle was complete, at first what we did is we said, well, these are just anomalies. They don't really fit in there because look, the physics is complete. We know what's real. We know how to look at it. But over time, more and more puzzle pieces started arising, and there was no place to put them. And eventually, over time, there were too many of them to really keep saying, well, those are just anomalies. And at about that time, Einstein and his colleagues took a step back from Newtonian physics, and taking all the pieces that had been considered anomalies into consideration, they realized that they could take apart the Newtonian physics puzzle a little bit, and by reorganizing the pieces into a larger frame, they could bring those anomalies into an explainable, bigger puzzle that was complete. And that's what we began to see when Einstein and his buddies started doing E equals mc squared and describing the universe in a much broader way from a physics perspective. And over time, even that view has expanded, and the puzzle has been taken apart again and again to continually be put back together in terms of quantum physics. And that actually is how change happens a lot of the time, is that we think we have a particular lock on how reality is. Now let's take that whole metaphor and use it for ourselves. A lock on how our life is. But over time, different puzzle pieces start floating up in our consciousness, in our feeling state, in our thinking, and they don't fit how we've organized our life. And at first what we do with those is we say, well, that doesn't really matter. That's just an anomaly. That's just a thought. That's just a feeling. I'm going to just put it over here and not worry about it, because my life, I've got it where I want it to be. It's set. It's complete. It's good. But over time, because the universe, by means of us, is always seeking to bring us into a greater and greater evolution of our own consciousness over time, we have to pay attention to the thoughts and the feelings, the things that are floating up, that are arising in us, that are asking us to take a step back from our life and look at it from a broader perspective, because there's something more that's trying to be born by means of us. One of the stories, I was thinking about this talk last night as I went to bed, and I love the parables of Jesus. I think he was a master teacher. And one of the parables, I don't have my my Bible that I usually use at the center, so I'm forced to use a very ancient copy of King James, which is not my favorite languaging, but there's a simple parable that Jesus offered that goes like this. And for you Bible people, this is in Matthew 9:17. Neither do we put new wine into old wineskins, else the wineskins will burst and the wine will run out. But rather, you put new wine into new skins so that both may be preserved. And that's the parable. It's super simple. But what he's talking about here is that, in those days, wineskins were made of goat bellies. And if you had an old wineskin, it lost its fluidity, its flexibility. It was no longer as plastic as a new goat stomach would be. And so if you put new wine in, it would literally, if you put it into an old goat belly, it would, through fermentation, burst through the old one because it wasn't flexible enough to deal with the fermentation process. And he was offering this parable as a way of talking about when we have new understanding, when we embrace a new life for ourselves, a new creation, we have to put aside the old ideas that maybe we've been allowing to run our life and step back from those for a time to look at a broader picture for ourselves and thereby have a new perspective, a new skin in which to relate to our new ideas. They're effervescent, they're creative, they want us to go in new directions, they want us to think in new ways, they want us to encounter reality in a different way, a more expanded way. And a lot of times, this is actually the biggest challenge with change for us, is we're used to living life in a certain frame. We're used to having the way we do things be the way we do things. And the reason I'm talking about this really is because here we are in the middle of a pandemic. And it has created for us, whether we wanted it to or not, a huge amount of change. We're in the river of change. And depending on how we've trained ourselves, this is either really good news or it's awful. And there's not a lot in between. For those of us who are feeling like it's awful, often the reason we feel that way is that we had become so accustomed to living our life within a certain frame. And it probably was a really great frame. We were able to do what we wanted to do in the way we wanted to do it. We could have the kind of food we wanted right away. We could see the people we wanted to see. We could talk the way we wanted and do the things we wanted to do out in the outer world. And now that's not possible. And for a lot of people, this is so uncomfortable, so awful, that much of their day is spent in trying to find ground, in trying to find a way to be comfortable in the midst of a very uncomfortable situation. And sometimes, as I said last week, we project that discomfort outwardly in frustration or anger. We want things to change on the outer level so that we can feel comfortable inside again and go back to our routines and our habit energies and how we used to run our lives. But there's another way. There's another way of looking at this whole thing. And I would be remiss as a spiritual teacher if I didn't point out that there's an opportunity within this challenge. That this actually is how change can happen for us globally as well as individually. And one of the things we must master is this tendency to want things to be the way they've always been. And instead, to be within the river of change, see that it's happening, experience the discomfort, but then allow it to inspire us to new understanding, new creation. The other thing I was thinking about an old thing that Michael Beckwith has said. You've probably heard it. He said, for sacred humans, well, okay, I added that term, but for sacred humans, we're either pushed by pain or pulled by a vision. And in this time of change, one of the things we can do to embrace change and actually allow it to lift us into an evolved state of understanding the world and acting in the world is, instead of being pushed by pain, the pain of change, the pain of our habits being disrupted, the pain of isolation, we can instead begin to be pulled by a vision of how we want our life to be. We can literally use this time as a chance to step back and view our life with a broader perspective and allow it to invite us into new vision. In fact, this whole thing could actually serve as a metaphor for really looking at the random puzzle pieces that have been floating up in your consciousness from time to time, those niggling little discomforts that you had before the pandemic, where you knew that there was something that needed to change. Remember those things? You knew that there were ways that you were relating to yourself and your beloved others and the world that really wanted to seek to change. And then the pandemic hit, and here we are. So in order for us to really embrace change, there's a couple of things to learn from the metaphor of Newton and Einstein and quantum. The first is that we don't throw out an old system to invite a new system in. That's not how it works most of the time. Instead, what we do is we take the best of what we've gained from the old way we've been living, and we move ourselves into a larger frame of expression. You see this in forests all the time. These beautiful trees, when they're done at the end of their life, fall and become the feeding nursery for the new trees that are coming up. We don't negate the fact that those trees have lost their life. Instead, we embrace the fact that they're nourishing new growth in the forest. And for us, our old understanding are like those old trees. We need to let go of them, perhaps, but we don't need to invalidate the way we've been living, but rather understand that that brought us to this point where we can now grow in new ways. In the wedding ceremonies that I do, I often share a poem from Rumi that goes like this. If God said, Rumi, pay homage to everything that has brought you into my arms, there would not be a person or an experience or even a word left out. And in this way, I think we need to honor where we've come from. We need to honor all the learning we've done up to this point. We need to understand that we had a frame of reference that was very powerful and very good for us for a long time. And so we bow to that. We say thank you to that. And we embrace the things that we can carry forward on our journey while letting the rest of it go so that we can embrace the changes that are now wanting to be made and nourish ourselves with the old while reaching for the new, reaching for new understanding, new expression. You know what happens when we allow this to happen? You know I'm a fan of Emerson, so you know, because this is my first home visit, I'm going to read you a little bit from Emerson. But you know, he has some interesting things to say about how change happens and what we do. And in his essay on compensation, there's one of these incredible passages that he has throughout his essays. And this one has to do with the necessity of change. And you've heard me talk about this particular essay a lot because I'm aware how change is really difficult for a lot of us. We have some resistance to it. And I've always wanted to encourage all of us, including myself, to embrace change and allow it to unfold us in new directions. So this is the last part of his essay on compensation. And he says, yet the compensations of calamity are made apparent to the understanding after long intervals of time. A fever, a mutilation, a cruel disappointment, a loss of wealth, a loss of friends seems at the moment unpaid loss. But the sure years reveal the deep healing force that underlies all facts. The death of a dear friend, wife, brother, lover, which seemed nothing but deep deprivation somewhat later assumes the aspect of a guide or genius, for it commonly operates revolutions in our way of life, terminates a time of infancy or youth which was waiting to be closed, breaks up a familiar occupation or household or a style of living, and allows the formation of new ones more friendly to the growth of character. And the man or the woman who would have remained a sunny garden flower with no room for its roots and too much sunshine for its head, by the falling of the walls and the neglect of the gardener, is made the banyan of the forest, yielding shade and fruit to wide neighborhoods of humanity. What does that mean in terms of change, your change and my change? Well, it means that we can view this pandemic and the actions we've taken in a powerful way. We can begin to see that this is happening personally for us, to embrace the changes that we've needed to make in our life. We can actually see that this pandemic has knocked down the walls of our habits and allowed us to view the world in a much broader context. And we can allow the changes that we see needing to be made to actually be made by us in a way that evolves us as sacred humans. So how do we do that? Well, I was teaching a class this morning, and if you'd like to join that class, it's not too late. Just shoot me an email at Andrea Asebedo@att.net. I was teaching the class on how we change. And there are a number of ways we change, but the one that I was talking about today comes from Joe Dispenza's work. And he is a master at teaching how we can actually use our mental capacity and our emotional capacity in united effort to change the outer reality that we would like to see. And the way we do that is we deeply hold a new idea of how we would like to be in our world. We embrace that idea as if it is already happening now, and we flesh it out in our mind's eye with as much detail and as much emotional content as we possibly can. And marrying that emotional content, we elevate that content so that now we actually are imagining our future is happening right now. So the changes that you're wanting to make, you would imagine that they have already been made, and you literally get a detailed inner image of how those changes have now taken place and how you're different and how your life is different. And you elevate the feeling of how wonderful that is, how incredible it is to be in that life as if it was happening right now. And what's true from a neurobiological standpoint is your inner world does not know the difference between an outer reality that's created outside of you and an inner reality that's created by your mind and emotional state, your state of being. And so as we begin to embrace those changes as if they had already happened and feel them as happened, we actually manifest the reality first at an inner level of expression, and then outwardly our world begins to shift and change. This is actually how change happens. Can you do that? Can you make that happen? Of course you can. And yes, it takes effort. And yes, it isn't easy always. I was telling the class that, whenever we make a change, there's a part of us that resists the change because we're used to living our life in a habitual circle of subconscious programming. And to change consciously means that we're interrupting the programming. And boy, have we been interrupted, haven't we? Our entire habitual way of being has shifted. And it's an opportunity, an opening for us to embrace the changes that we've always wanted to make for ourselves. And why is this relevant? Well, we can't have a new reality in the world if we're the same old, same old. The effervescent energy of spirit that is seeking to transform us globally as well as personally, that effervescent spirit can't be poured into an old container of who we are. It has to come into a new, more fluid, more flexible person that we've become. We have to make room for that effervescent new energy. And to do that, we can't hold on to the old. Instead, we honor the old and open to the new and practice the changes that we know we need to make. In this way, we've created a new container for spirit to arise within us and transform us as individuals, but also because we're all doing that work, our society begins to transform. The way we look at the planet, the way we look at how we've been treating Mother Earth, the way we look at how we've been interacting with the people around us. Maybe we've noticed that, wow, I really was taking those relationships for granted. Or maybe we're in a home situation where we're looking at the people, our beloved others, and realizing we really haven't been present to them. Not really. And we could continue the same old habit energy of just going about our own business. Or we could allow change to transform through our awareness that, wow, I haven't been present for these people that I love, and really actually make some shift in the way we habitually interact with one another. And maybe those kinds of shifts make us look deeply at the kinds of shifts that we need to make in the broader circle of our circle of influence. And maybe if we all do that, we begin to understand that change happens individually and moves out from there to change us globally as sacred humans united together. This is the work that I'm interested in doing. So I'll focus on myself. I'll focus on the changes that I need to make. I'll begin the work of really using my mind and heart to focus on what I want to have as a reality and work with that diligently day after day, mentally and emotionally, so that I begin to transform myself and in that way become part of a global transformation that changes everything for the better. If you're with me on this, I invite you now to join me in our form of spiritual prayer. Know with me as I know there is something within us all that knows a greater reality for each of us. Not in some sort of general, generic way, but personally, intimately, knows exactly the evolutionary path that will take us to a higher, deeper, richer experience of our own nature unfolding. I unify my mind and heart with that knowing, with that internal, indwelling presence, and I say yes to it, opening to the changes that I need to make, and experiencing those changes not as being pushed by pain, but by being pulled by a vision of global unity, global transformation that happens one sacred human at a time. And I am that one transforming my consciousness now. I am grateful for the insight and spirit moving in me and in you in this way, and I accept the action of the spirit now unfolding me in tremendous ways of growth. And so it is. I would like to just say a few announcements for you. I don't usually do this on the podcast, but because we're joining you from my living room, I wanted to remind you of a couple things. There is on the CSL website an invitation for you to go and vote for Center for Spiritual Living Bellingham Laundry Love with Bob Wallen Insurance. And we only have a few days left. There's only 3 days to vote for Laundry Love as a nonprofit program that you think deserves to be funded. They're awarding 3 different prizes, and right now we're not even the running for 3rd place. And it takes a lot of people going and voting. You can access that voting process through our website and click on the link, and it'll take you to a place where you can vote, and we'd love you to do that. Laundry Love is one of the programs that we hold dear to our heart. We started it a number of years ago. It's been supporting people who are experiencing homelessness and supporting people with low income to go to a laundromat, to have clean clothes, and in this way to feel a sense of pride and dignity in oneself, and also sort of laterally to hopefully help clean up the environmental consequences of people just simply discarding clothing that has gotten dirty onto the landscape. So we'd love you to vote for that. We also know that one of our major fundraisers of the year, Gourmets for Good, has been delayed because of the pandemic and our cooperation in sequestering ourselves. And we would love that program to continue when we're all set free from self-isolation. To make that program work, we need a number of people who are willing to host a particular dinner party or luncheon or picnic. And on the same website, CSL Bellingham website, you will find a host form. And if you're willing to host a dinner or some sort of event and fill out the form, giving us some dates in late June, July, and August, September, October, as soon as we're all able to be together once more, we'll set up the ability to bid on those dinners and events and raise money for the center. Last year, this program raised $16,000 for our center, and that's a huge chunk of our budget. So we're looking for you, hoping that you can support us in that way by doing that. Now, don't forget, we also have 2 online classes that you can still participate in. Last Wednesday, Kat Wingirter, one of our ministerial students, started a class from whence we came. You can call the center office to find information about that and get signed up. And today, at 12:30, Joanne Allison is presenting the first class of Prosperity Plus 3. And if you would like to be a part of that, I would encourage you to call the center office, 360-734-4160. It may be too late for you to access today's class, but we will get you signed up and get you involved in the class from this point forward, and we'd love you to be a part of that. I want to thank all of you who made a donation last week when I asked if you could. It's made the world of difference. It's a scary time for every nonprofit and certainly for our center. We deeply appreciate the donations that you made last week. And if you have the ability to make a donation today, you can press the donate button and that will help us tremendously. I thank you very much for tuning in today. And now I want to close my session and remind you that our wonderful music director, Amber Darlin, is ready, and she's about to go live on the Center Facebook page to provide you with some wonderful, uplifting music that hopefully you can sing and dance to and enjoy the heck out of. May you be well, may you be safe, may you be at peace in this time. I love you.